Harper awoke to the delicate tapping of wind against the bedroom window. Soft and rhythmic like a distant lullaby, she blinked slowly, letting the silence wash over her. The bed beside her remained untouched, no crease in the pillow, no warmth left behind, just the hollow indentation where love used to lie. She reached out, fingertips grazing the cold sheet where Cole's body no longer rested. 2 days. It had only been 2 days since he walked out of the door with a small suitcase, barely filled with clothes, and a look on his face that she hadn't been able to name, something between sadness and surrender. He hadn't told her where he was going, and she hadn't asked, not because she didn't want to know, but because the ache in her chest was already too great to bear any more truths. The house was still, not the kind of peaceful stillness that brings comfort, but the kind that amplifies absence. It was once filled with the sound of shared laughter, midnight whispers, and the rustling hope of two people building a life together. Now only silence lingered heavy, echoing with memories that felt both intimate and unreachable. Time had lost meaning. Harper glanced at the clock on the bedside table, but the digits seemed abstract, irrelevant. Slowly, she pulled herself from the bed, each step weighed down by the invisible burden of what was unraveling. In the kitchen, the coffee maker sat untouched, cold and lifeless like everything else in their home. She brewed a cup out of habit, more for the motion than the result. Her mind drifted back to the beginning, the first time she saw Cole, tucked away in that buzzing university cafe. He had been shy, almost awkward, but he kept showing up day after day just for a glimpse of her. She'd found it sweet, his quiet persistence. Their first date had been a simple walk in the park. He'd held her hand with sweaty palms, nervous and honest. It wasn't grand, but it was real. They had been so full of hope back then, so convinced that love alone could weather any storm. Their marriage had once felt like the happiest chapter of their lives. Cole had always been the dreamer, the spark, the bright energy that turned every ordinary moment into something worth remembering. Harper had been the planner, the steady force grounding his whimsical spirit. Together, they had found a rhythm that worked. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been theirs. Fights were rare, fleeting, and never serious, until they were. The cracks started small, overdue bills, missed chores, forgotten dinners, little things, easily dismissed at first. But small annoyances grew into sharp words, then into long silences. Nights ended with backs turned. Conversations cut short. The joy began to fade. The idea of having children had once reignited something between them. They would talk for hours about baby names, colors for the nursery, imagining what it would be like to see pieces of themselves in a tiny new life. For a while, the hope was enough, but month after month, the test results returned with the same cold answer: not pregnant. Harper tried to remain hopeful, but each negative result chipped away at her spirit. Cole, ever the optimist, told her not to worry. There's time, he'd say. But to Harper, his reassurance felt thin, like he didn't understand the grief that was quietly consuming her. Eventually, the diagnosis came. Her body couldn't carry a child. Harper's worst fear confirmed. She felt broken, like a promise unkept. Cole had immediately offered alternatives, adoption, treatments, anything. He held her hand gently, trying to keep her from spiraling. But she couldn't meet his gaze without seeing everything she'd taken from him. How could she sentence him to a life without fatherhood? She began to withdraw, emotionally retreating behind walls he couldn't scale. She stopped talking about the future. She avoided his touch, and while he tried to be patient, it only took so long before that patience began to fray. "You need to talk to me," he had pleaded one night when she'd sat frozen in front of the TV, not seeing a thing on the screen. "Talk about what, Cole?" she snapped. "About how I feel like a failure every time I look at you. About how I've ruined our lives." "I chose you," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm not giving up. I didn't choose to be like this." She whispered, almost to herself. The fights escalated. Not about the big things, about cereal left out, trash not taken, birthdays forgotten. But those were just disguises. The real fight was always underneath, clawing to be heard. And then, one day, Cole simply stopped trying. No more shouting, no slammed doors, just silence. And that silence hurt more than all the shouting ever had. It was a surrender, the realization that they were two people living parallel lives, under the same roof. Now Harper sat alone, surrounded by what once was theirs. Her gaze settled on an envelope resting on the kitchen table, stiff, white, clinical. The name of a law firm printed across the top like a grim final chapter. Today, they would sign the divorce papers, officially ending 10 years of marriage. When she stepped into the lawyer's office that morning, the air felt too still, too quiet. The room, with its beige walls and shelves of legal texts, felt like a waiting room to grief. Cole sat across from her, dressed neatly, but his expression was a storm of confusion, pain, and resignation. The lawyer, an older man with graying hair and tired eyes, read the terms of the agreement in a tone devoid of emotion, as though this was just another transaction. Harper clutched the pen, her fingers aching from the pressure, her heart even more so. She glanced up. Cole was staring at her, not with anger, not with blame, but with something else, something deeper. She felt the weight of everything unspoken crash over her. And then, just as her pen was about to touch the paper, Cole's voice broke through. "Stop, don't sign that." The room froze. Harper's breath caught. "I know," he said gently. "I know you're sick." The words hit her like a blow. She felt the air vanish from the room. Her lips parted, but the sound came out in a whisper. "What did you just say?" "I know you have cancer," he said, calm, unwavering. The lawyer looked between them, clearly confused. "You're imagining things," Harper murmured, voice trembling, eyes dropping to her lap. "No, I'm not," Cole said softly. "I went to the apartment this morning. I found the envelope, the test results." The memory came back to her in a rush, leaving the paperwork in the drawer, assuming he'd never find it. But of course he had. Of course he'd gone back. Harper's walls began to crumble. "Did you really think I'd let you go through this alone?" he asked, his voice sharp with pain. She tried to speak, but the words tangled. How could she explain? The terror of becoming a burden, of watching love rot into pity, of seeing herself reflected in his eyes and finding only obligation. "I didn't want you to stay because you felt sorry for me," she whispered. "I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you." Cole leaned forward, took her hand gently in his. Even after everything, his touch still felt like home. "We ended up here," he said, voice quiet, "because we stopped fighting for each other. But I'm still here. I haven't stopped loving you." Tears spilled down Harper's cheeks, uncontainable. She looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time, not just love, but the fierce, unwavering kind. The kind that endured, that didn't run when things got hard, the kind that promised to stay, even when it hurt. "I don't want to lose you," Cole whispered, squeezing her hand. She opened her mouth to speak, but he placed a gentle finger on her lips. "No, don't say anything. We'll face this together, one day at a time." The lawyer quietly gathered the papers and placed them back into his briefcase. No signatures, no finality, just two people silently deciding to begin again. When Cole asked, "Shall we go home?" Harper paused. The word home had changed. It was no longer a place. It was him, his eyes, his hands, his voice. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. "Yes," she said simply. They walked out hand in hand, leaving behind not just the paperwork, but years of grief, guilt, and misunderstandings. The road ahead was uncertain, daunting, but no longer solitary. The following months were brutal in their own way. The hospital rooms, the chemotherapy, the dark circles under Harper's eyes. But Cole was there always, reading to her during sleepless nights, bringing her flowers when she felt hollow, reminding her with every word and gesture that she was never alone. And Harper, despite the pain, rediscovered something inside herself too, a renewed appreciation for every breath, every sunrise, every laugh. She began to dream again, not of the children they never had, but of moments, quiet mornings, shared meals, long walks holding his hand. Nearly 2 years after the day that almost ended it all, Harper got the call: remission. The cancer had receded. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it was a new beginning. That night, Cole prepared a small dinner at home. Nothing extravagant, just warmth, candlelight, and hope. after the dishes were cleared. He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate diamond ring. "I know we're already married," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I want to renew our vows, this time. Not just in health, but with full knowledge of what sickness looks like, of what forever really means." Harper couldn't speak. She just nodded as he slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing his vow with a kiss that trembled with everything they had endured. Months later, in the garden behind their home, the same place where they had shared so many quiet, beautiful moments, they stood again before friends and family. This time, their promises carried a depth neither could have imagined years ago. In sickness and in health wasn't just a phrase. It was lived, tested, proved real. And as they kissed once more beneath a canopy of blossoms and sky, Harper and Cole knew that love isn't about perfection. It's about staying, choosing each other, again and again, even when it would be easier to walk away. The future was still uncertain, but this time they would face it hand in hand, heart to heart, undaunted. Because the kind of love they had now, it wasn't just written in vows. It was forged in the fire of everything they survived. And that kind of love didn't break. It endured.